So it's my goal here just to prepare you with enough context so that what you see in the demo makes a tremendous amount of sense. The long and short of it is we're entering the what I would consider to be, the third modern age of identity, right? We traditionally had sort of client server type authentication interactions, right? Secured by a traditional perimeter. It was mostly humans, right? Generally, people would be running automation using their service accounts, right? Then we sort of evolved into the modern cloud age, right? Where now we're talking about, infrastructure as code and deploying more ephemeral types of credentials. And with this, we saw an explosion of sort of machine identities in order to be able to run automation, right? I really think that we're entering the third age of identity, which is really focused on agentic AI and how we are providing a level of not just access, but authorization and auditability and the ability to track what an agent is doing across activities, but also making sure that a human is in the loop when there needs to be, and validating that this agent hasn't been compromised. So in order to do that, right, machine identities have exploded. We see a tremendous amount of increase in risk and compliance because of that. And so how are we, looking at bringing a strategy that helps us to focus on more dynamic scenarios, right? As I was mentioning, AI agents are now doing things on my behalf, right? I need to have better ability to do access reviews. We need to be able to do zero trust, so do authentication close to the actual the decision, and then we need to deliver that auditability while maintaining privacy and consent regulations that are core to the governing principles like GDPR and CCPA. So at IBM, our perspective is basically securing the identity fabric. And so what you'll see with most modern AI applications is that we have some type of modern IDP for workforce and consumer, right? Today, your user is going to probably log in, then they're going to access an AI application. They're going to leverage, sort of organizational LLM providers. So if you have agentic agents within your organization, we're actually going to, connect through that, right? So your AI application is going to use some type of large language model. It's going to interface with some type of MCP server. An MCP server is going to provide a set of tools, right, that your agentic agent can leverage in order to accomplish some tasks, and then it's going to use those tools to access data, right? We need to be able to provide proper secrets. So the MCP server itself, right, it's going to give you a list of tools, but it's not really granting specific access, right? So what we need some type of secrets vault to be able to store and manage these for your privileged application data. And then we want to be able to provide token management between your actual AI user, your users and your AI agents, right? So how are we going to do that? We need a token management layer, right, that can do token exchange. And then finally, we need to provide observability across your human and non-human identity infrastructure. So what we're seeing is that, this flow that sort of has some traditional elements to it is sort of modified for the AI age, right? So now instead of just, hey, I'm going to hit my IDP and log in, right? Now I need to have additional considerations to secure the agent and ensure that we're giving very specifically scoped tokens for the task that the agent is trying to accomplish. And so we at IBM, right, we bring a host of solutions that can slot in here to be able to give that level of control at each level of the new AI security fabric and provide, secure access, secure SSO, secure token exchange, and secure vaulted credentials that are generated in a dynamic way to provide singular access while also providing that observability to make sure that things are going as you would expect. So this is a very logical diagram. Next, I'm going to show you some very specific diagrams. So for very simple operations, you may not need this certain level of control, but for higher higher assurance, higher risk, higher what's the word I'm looking for? Sensitivity of your data. We need to allow additional controls in this flow to be able to provide specific, you know, scoped access. So here we're talking about what this might look like to receive personalized information from an AI agent. Simple use case, support chatbot needs to query customer specific data, account information, personalization recommendations. What we're looking at here is that Alice or Bob, right, both have read-only access. They're going to access through the UI. What's going to happen is they're going to talk to the AI agent and ask it a question, right? That AI agent is going to request information, or rather a token exchange from IBM Verify that says, hey, Alice has asked me to look up some information. Let me exchange my token and get a new token that says I'm going to act on behalf of Alice to pull information that she has access to, right? So that token exchange happens at IBM Verify. We can do additional context validation using rich authorization requests, right? Which is a OAuth 2 convention. Um, that JOT token is then going to contain very specific context, session ID, and delegation claims, right? So we're mapping directly in the token what that agent is able to do and access. And then from there, right, we get explicit time to lives and revocation on session termination. And Vault is going to create the dynamic credentials that allow for that access, right? So the Vault agent or SDK is then going to generate credentials that the agent could then use to access at a one-time use type flow. And Ryan is going to show you something very similar to this in our demo. And then last but most certainly not least, right, I'm just going to show one more flow. This one is providing out-of-band notification, providing human in the loop flows. So essentially here, say there is a sensitive enough transaction like a bank operation, or we're doing something that is slightly outside of the general flow that you would consider, normal, and you would want a human to actually do some validation. Here we're doing a very similar flow, right? So user authenticates through the UI, they communicate with the AI agent, they do their SSO, and then the AI agent is going to request a token exchange, based on the operation that's happening, saying, hey, can I act on behalf of Alice? Verify is going to provide that very specifically scoped token again, but this time, depending on the context, right, we're going to take a look and we're going to see, hey, does this lie outside the parameters that would require a human to come in the loop here and provide some type of validation, right? So then we can actually do a push and we can do that human in the loop flow. But from end to end, right, we have the ability to look specifically at what Alice is able to do. We're issuing specifically scoped tokens to act against very specific tools to do only what Alice is allowed to do, and only allow that agent to do action if Alice has done the appropriate challenge and completed that flow. So yeah, so that's essentially, the overarching flow. That's what we're able to accomplish. We have the ability to implement these more advanced, human in the loop rich authorization request flows. We have the ability to implement on behalf of flows. And that gives us the ability to really scope down and secure what an AI agent is able to do. So with that, I will go ahead and pause here, and I will turn it over to Ryan, who will show you an example of some of this stuff working in the real world. All right, Ryan, over to you.
All right, perfect, and I appreciate the intro and the walkthrough there, Andy. So yeah, again, so start to finish here, right? I want to make something very, 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 very clear, because there seems to be a little bit of confusion on what we mean sometimes when we say on behalf of, right? There's really two types of on behalf of flows. There's delegation and there's impersonation. At no point in anytime do you want an agentic agent to impersonate a human being. That's not what we're doing here. What we're saying is that this agent is acting on behalf of a human being to do something small. And that's kind of what Andy was mentioning when he said like OBO and delegated access flows. When we say OBO during this demo, at no point are we talking about impersonation. We are only talking about specifically uh, uh, the agentic agent working on behalf of somebody with delegated access. This person has approved the agentic agent to do this kind of thing. Okay, and we're going to see that here in action. So the first thing I need to do is sign in, and I'm not going to take you through all the sign up and sign in and passkey registration stuff because most of us know what that looks like, right? So I'm just going to log in with the passkey. You can see that I'm a federated user. This is really me. This is my IBM identity, and what I can actually do here is look at my access token. And just to keep it at a super high level, what's important here are two different things. One, I have already approved this agentic agent to work on my behalf. Thus, one of my scopes is agentic, and that allows us to do all kinds of policy stuff in the back end, you know, with how much the agentic agent's allowed to maybe transfer or the things that agentic agent's allowed to do by default, right? Without that, I wouldn't be able to even log into the agentic AI agent. I would be redirected and saying, hey, I need to get your consent to allow this agent to work on your behalf. But because I've already allowed this agent to work on my behalf, I have this. And we have this specific field in the access token within verify to say what can act on my behalf. And this is just the unique ID of the agent that was spun up. So only this agent and only this instance of this agent can act on my behalf. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop over to the agentic agent and do something simple. So get user data. The first thing that it's going to do, and we'll see here in the agent log, that it's going to do all kinds of things. So it needs to authenticate to HashiVault, needs to authenticate to verify, it needs to have access in both places. It needs to be able to have access to the specific dynamic secrets in HashiVault to check those out and use them to do all kinds of things like get its own access token, to actually exchange its token for a new one, which is what we're seeing it do here. And that is our delegated access token. That is what is saying that agent can specifically act on my behalf to go and do something. And then we just get the MCP call back with is just a bunch of data, and then the LLM transfers that data into something that's reasonable for the human. But what's important here specifically is that agent was authorized to act on my behalf. It got a limited scoped access token for a specific purpose. Policies were implemented on the back end, triggered, and everything else, and then it returned the data as appropriate. So one of the things that we might want, and a lot of things that we are seeing customers want and people want in the real world, is human in the loop, right? These are with your SIBA flows, these are with your email OTPs, and I've set one of those up here just as an example, so I can say, hey, I want to transfer $200 from one account to another. Now that could be considered a high risk transaction. If it's over a certain threshold, we could flag it and trigger SIBA or human in the loop flows. If it's not, then maybe we just allow it by default depending on the user's access. It really just depends on what you want to do. But the point here is if I say transfer 300 from my savings to my checking accounts, the agent probably wants to make sure that I am who I say I am before they actually trigger the flow. So if I send this, then it's going to tell me, okay, it needs the account ID. So I'm going to say account 1042103, and then it's going to say, boom, all this other stuff starts kicking off. So it recognizes it needs to call the tool, it needs to get more secrets from Vault, and now it's sent the request to my authenticator, and it's waiting for my approval, which is on my actual work phone, so I'm not going to show that. Authorize, and I'm seeing authorize AI agent to transfer $200 from checkings or from savings to checking account. I'm going to approve that, and you're going to see the SIBA has been approved because we're done with polling. And now that that's done, the transfers actually happen, and all of that happened on the back end for the agent to validate what it can and cannot do with policies being implemented. Now, on the more important thing here, if I go to demos, USC. I'm going to go to the admin side. So we're tracking all of this on the back end. Which agents are acting on behalf of which users at which time for what reasons and what accesses and policies are being implemented all in the back, right? So we're tracking all of this data and we can send it to SOARs, we can send it to SIMs, we can send it to whatever the heck we need to automatically take action. Even partially, we've validated this with a shared signals framework, as you can see here, where something super risky, like I say, hey, I want to access Andy's account instead of my own, that might be a super high risk, like someone's trying to use this token for something it's not supposed to be used for. That's going to be flagged as malicious, and we can use the shared signals framework to actually revoke that token, rotate it, and lock out that user session as an example. But more importantly here, my lord, do we have a bunch of authentication requests? Nope, not the MCP server. This is actually what I'm looking for. So I have me. This is agentic AI demo to agentic AI demo. This is actually the introspection. This is the issuance. This it keeps popping up the wrong one. This one. It says SSO event. It's not an SSO event. Yeah, load different data, and then we're going to load that data back. There we go. That's actually what I'm looking for. So it isn't a SSO event, but it's me. It's my username. I just simply logged into this. You can see the granted scope that we had. This is the token that had the May Act in there, and of course we introspected that token in the demo to validate audiences and everything like that. This is the agentic agent itself logging in to validate that, hey, I'm supposed to be here. And what you're going to see is that there are no scopes. It has no scopes by default because it doesn't need any scopes by default. It just says, hey, or it might need, depending on your agent, but this specific agent doesn't need any scopes by default because it doesn't need access to anything yet. It just says, hey, I'm supposed to be here. You know who I am. I've authenticated the vault. I also have a vault token, and I'm waiting to use both depending on what the user requests. Then we have this token exchange, and this token exchange occurs on my behalf, and the agentic AI agent's in here, and it requested these specific scopes. Now, this is kind of a debug bunk all scopes. We can scope it down, we can scope it up, we can apply policy, we don't have to apply policy. The world's your oyster at this point. The fact of the matter is that we can see that this agent worked on my behalf to do these specific things. Then that was passed to the MCP server and it was introspected. It was passed to the API endpoint and that was also introspected. And that's of course checking for all of your super nerdy token stuff like your audiences and your scopes and making sure that this user actually exists in this application. The other stuff that APIs and MCP servers typically do, right? So start to finish here, we are monitoring what agents are doing what things on which user's behalf, and more importantly, we have these contextual informations with this data to say, is this normal? Is this high risk? This is a transaction, as an example, for this amount. And we can write policies and do whatever we need to make sure that anything that's high risk gets secured appropriately, and that's becoming even more important with things like the open banking standard. But start to finish, this is how we monitor and track with Vault and verify which agentic AI agents are doing what on whose behalf. Machine to machine is a little bit different. That's a lot more towards the Vault side to spin up, spin down, and everything else like that. But this specifically on behalf of flows is really the tricky part, because if you're not doing proper delegation of access, it all falls apart. So start to finish, yeah, that's our agentic AI demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Awesome demo.